I told you you're mine alone.
But did you have to do that?
I told you you're mine alone. The words cut through the silence of the penthouse office like a blade, sharp and possessive. Kale's voice was low, dangerous, the kind of tone that made grown men reconsider their life choices. But Isla wasn't a grown man, and she definitely wasn't backing down. She stood there, her dark skin gleaming under the ambient lighting of his windows, the city of souls sprawling behind her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. Her curves were accentuated by the burgundy dress she wore, the kind that hugged every inch of her body with an almost sinful precision. Her natural hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, a few coils escaping to frame her face, and her brown eyes blazed with something between fury and disbelief. "But did you have to do that?" she shot back, her voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. Kale moved closer, and that's when you could really see him. Devastatingly handsome didn't even begin to cover it. He was the kind of beautiful that felt dangerous, like staring directly at the sun. Sharp jawline, full lips that curved into smirks more often than smiles, and those eyes, those piercing dark eyes that seemed to strip away every defense you had. But it was the ink that really set him apart. Intricate geometric patterns and celestial designs wound their way up both his arms, disappearing under his rolled-up white shirt sleeves, only to emerge again at his collarbone and creep up the sides of his neck. Constellations, mathematical equations, ancient symbols that seemed to tell a story only he understood. It was art and chaos combined, beautiful and terrifying, just like the man wearing it. "Did I have to?" he repeated, his accent thick with that soul inflection that somehow made everything sound more intense. "Isla, he touched you." "He shook my hand, Kale." She threw her hands up, exasperated. "At a business gala, that's what people do." "He wanted more than your hand." And there it was. That jealousy that had been simmering under the surface for 3 years, finally boiling over in the most spectacular way possible. Let me take you back a bit, because this didn't just happen overnight. This was years in the making. Isla had been 23 when she first walked into Kale's office, fresh out of university with a business degree and absolutely no idea what she was getting herself into. She applied for a secretary position at what she thought was a legitimate import-export company. And technically, it was. Kale's operations were mostly legal, shrouded in just enough legitimacy to keep authorities at bay, while he ran one of the most powerful underground networks in Seoul. But Isla didn't know that on day one. She just knew that the man sitting behind that massive desk, barely looking up from his documents, was the most beautiful human being she'd ever seen, and also the most intimidating. "You're late," had been his first words to her. "The address you sent was for the building next door," she'd replied, refusing to be cowed. "Your assistant gave me the wrong information." That had made him look up, really look at her, and for a moment something flickered in those dark eyes. Surprise, maybe. Interest, definitely. "Most people apologize anyway," he'd said. "I'm not most people." The corner of his mouth had twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "No, I don't think you are." She gotten the job on the spot. Those first few months had been a crash course in organized crime, though no one called it that. Isla learned to read between the lines, to understand that when Kale said he had a meeting, it might involve anything from legitimate business deals to sitting down with people who carried guns under their suit jackets. She learned that the money flowing through his accounts came from dozens of sources, most legal, some decidedly not. And she learned that Kale was viciously protective of the people in his inner circle. There weren't many. There was Marcus, his right-hand man and childhood friend, a giant of a Korean American with a scar running down his left cheek and a surprisingly gentle disposition. There was Yuna, his information broker, a tiny woman with purple hair who could hack into anything with a circuit board. And there was Jin, his driver and bodyguard, who rarely spoke but communicated volumes with his eyes. Isla had somehow slipped into that circle without even realizing it. It started small, Kale asking her opinion on business decisions, him staying late when she stayed late, the two of them working in comfortable silence, him remembering how she took her coffee, the way his hand would hover at the small of her back when they walked into meetings together, never quite touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of his palm through her clothes. But he never crossed that line. 3 years. 3 years of this dance, this push and pull, this magnetic attraction that neither of them acknowledged out loud. Until tonight. The annual Seoul Business Excellence Awards was the kind of event where Korea's elite gathered to see and be seen. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, designer gowns that cost more than most people's annual salary. Kale attended every year, not because he cared about the awards, but because it was good for business. Networking, they called it. Isla called it schmoozing with people who probably had just as many secrets as Kale did. She'd worn the burgundy dress specifically because she knew it would drive him crazy. Not that she'd admit that. But she'd seen the way his jaw tightened when she'd emerged from her apartment building, the way his eyes had tracked down her body and back up again, lingering just a second too long on her curves before he'd schooled his expression back to neutral. "You look presentable," he'd said. "You look like you swallowed a lemon," she'd shot back. Jin had coughed to cover a laugh from the driver's seat. The gala had been going smoothly. Isla had been doing what she did best, managing Kale's schedule, deflecting unwanted conversations, making sure he networked with the right people. She was good at her job, exceptional even. That's why he'd kept her around for 3 years. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Then Yi-Han had walked into the room. Yi was everything Kale was. Where Kale was dark and dangerous, Yi was light and charming. Heir to one of Seoul's oldest hotel chains, educated in the States, with an easy smile and the kind of confidence that came from never having to fight for anything in his life. He was handsome in a classical way, all symmetrical features and designer suits. And he'd made a beeline straight for Isla. "I don't think we've met," he'd said, extending his hand. "Yi-Han." Isla had glanced at Kale, who was deep in conversation with a parliament member about shipping regulations. She'd taken Yi's hand. "Isla Santos, I'm Mr. Kang's executive secretary." "Executive secretary," Yi had repeated, his eyes lighting up. "That sounds like a fancy way of saying you run his life." She laughed despite herself. Something like that. "Well, anyone who can manage Kale Kang deserves a medal. The man's reputation precedes him." "Does it now?" "Ruthless businessman, brilliant strategist, terrible at small talk." Yi had leaned in conspiratorially. "I once saw him tell a woman her dress was adequate and genuinely not understand why she looked offended." Isla had bitten back a smile. That sounded exactly like Kale. "He values honesty." "He values efficiency," Yi had corrected. "There's a difference, but you're different, I can tell." That's when she'd felt it. The prickle at the back of her neck, the sensation of being watched. She'd glanced over to find Kale staring directly at her, his conversation with the parliament member clearly over. The look on his face had been thunderous. But Yi had been oblivious, continuing to chat, asking her about her background, her interests, complimenting her dress in a way that was appreciative without being sleazy. He'd been perfectly nice, perfectly appropriate. And that had been the problem. Because when Kale had finally extracted himself from his conversation and made his way over, the temperature in the room had seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Yi," he'd said, his voice pleasant in a way that was somehow more threatening than if he'd been openly hostile. "I wasn't aware you knew my secretary." "Just met her," Yi had replied, completely missing the warning signs. "She's delightful, you're lucky to have her." "I'm aware." The way Kale had said those 2 words, the possessiveness dripping from every syllable, had sent a shiver down Isla's spine. And not entirely an unpleasant one, which had annoyed her. "We should exchange contact information," Yi had said to Isla, pulling out his phone. "I'm actually looking for someone with your organizational skills for a new hotel project I'm launching. Even if you're not interested, I'd love to pick your brain about project management." It had been a genuine offer, professional, completely above board. Kale had placed his hand on the small of Isla's back, this time making contact. His palm had been warm through the thin fabric of her dress, fingers splaying possessively across her spine. "Ms. Santos's expertise is not available for consultation," he'd said smoothly. "She's quite occupied with her current position." Isla had felt her temper flare. She was perfectly capable of deciding whether or not to share her contact information. But before she could say anything, Yi had backed off gracefully. Of course, my apologies. It was lovely meeting you, Isla. He disappeared into the crowd, and Isla had rounded on Kale. What was that? What was what? His face had been the picture of innocence, which on him looked utterly unconvincing. That proprietary alpha male nonsense. He was being professional. He was interested in you. He was interested in hearing me as a consultant. He was interested in you, Kale had repeated, his voice dropping an octave. As more than a consultant. So what if he was? I'm a grown woman, Kale. I can handle a man's interest without you swooping in like some possessive. We're leaving. He'd cut her off, his hand still on her back, guiding her toward the exit. The gala isn't over. It is for us. The car ride back had been silent, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Jin had kept his eyes firmly on the road, wisely staying out of it. Kale had stared out the window, his jaw clenched, the geometric patterns on his neck seeming to pulse with his elevated heart rate. When they'd arrived at his building, Isla had moved to get out, to go home, to put some distance between them and whatever this was spiraling into. My office, Kale had said, now. It hadn't been a request. Which brought them to now. To this moment, in his penthouse office, the city glittering below them like scattered diamonds, the air between them crackling with 3 years of unspoken tension. You don't own me, Kale, Isla said, her voice steady despite the way her heart was hammering against her ribs. I'm your secretary, not your property. Something flashed across his face, hurt maybe, quickly masked by anger. Is that what you think this is? Ownership? What else would you call it? You just sabotaged a perfectly innocent conversation because you couldn't handle another man talking to me. He wasn't just talking to you, Isla. He was. Kale ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up the carefully styled strands. It was the most disheveled she'd ever seen him. He was looking at you the way. The way what? The way I look at you, he finished quietly. The admission hung between them, heavy and dangerous and utterly electrifying. Isla's breath caught. 3 years. 3 years of wondering, of those almost touches and loaded glances, of lying awake at night convincing herself she was imagining the tension between them. Kale, you know what I see when I look at you, he continued, moving closer. Not touching her, not yet, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark with notes of cedar and smoke. I see the woman who walks into my office every morning with her head held high, who's never once been intimidated by the things I do or the people I associate with. I see someone who's brilliant and beautiful and so far above me that I have no business even thinking about her the way I do. That's not. I see the only person who's ever made me want to be something other than what I am, he interrupted, his voice raw. And tonight, watching him look at you, talk to you, make you laugh, it made me realize something. What? That I'm not the only one who sees it, and that terrifies me. Isla's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. So your solution is to scare off anyone who shows interest in me, to make decisions about my life without consulting me. No, yes, I don't know, he laughed, but it was a broken sound. I'm not good at this, Isla. I'm good at strategy, at business, at making calculated decisions. But with you, everything is complicated. You think it's not complicated for me, she shot back, her own frustration bubbling over. You think I don't notice the way you watch me, the way you find excuses to keep me late at the office, the way you positioned your desk so you can see me through your office window while I work. His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't known she'd noticed that. I have spent 3 years pretending I don't feel this thing between us, Isla continued, her voice rising. 3 years telling myself that it's just a job, that you're just my boss, that these feelings are inappropriate and unprofessional and completely one-sided. And now you're telling me that it's not one-sided, but you're still making decisions for me like I'm some possession to be guarded. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing, Kale? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want to have it both ways. You want me close enough to satisfy whatever this is between us, but not close enough that it actually means something. You want to scare off other men without actually claiming me yourself. Claiming you? He stepped even closer now, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Isla, if I claimed you, if I let myself actually have you, do you have any idea what that would mean? Enlighten me. It would mean you'd be in danger. Anyone who wants to get to me would know that you're the fastest route. It would mean board meetings where people whisper about nepotism and favoritism. It would mean you'd be tied to me and everything I am, everything I do, legal and not. It would mean that every enemy I've made over the years would have your name on their list. The words should have scared her. They really should have. But instead, all Isla felt was anger, white-hot and clarifying. So you've decided for me that it's too dangerous, that I'm too fragile to handle your world. Kale, I've been handling your world for 3 years. I know exactly what you do, who you deal with, the risks involved. I'm not some naive girl who needs protection from reality. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're making decisions about what I can and can't handle without ever asking me what I want. What do you want, Isla? The question came out raw, desperate. Tell me what you want. The honest answer was him. She wanted him with an intensity that sometimes scared her, wanted his hands on her skin, wanted to understand what made a man like him tick, wanted to be the person he came home to at the end of terrible days. She wanted morning coffee and late-night strategy sessions, and the right to stand beside him not as his secretary, but as his equal. But she was also furious with him for putting her in this position, for the years of mixed signals, for tonight's display of jealous possessiveness that both thrilled and infuriated her. I want you to respect me enough to let me make my own choices, she said instead. I want you to trust that I know my own mind, and I want you to either be honest about what this is between us or let me go. The silence that followed was deafening. Kale's phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the moment. He ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent. Answer it, Isla said tiredly. It's clearly important. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. His expression darkened immediately. It's Marcus. He answered, putting it on speaker. This better be important. Boss, we have a situation. Marcus's voice was tight with urgency. It's about the Yeehan thing. Isla and Kale exchanged glances. What about it? Kale asked. You need to see this. I'm sending you a file now. Kale's phone pinged. He opened the attachment, and Isla watched his face go from concerned to absolutely livid in the span of seconds. What is it? She asked, moving closer to look at the screen. It was a series of photographs, Yi at various locations around Seoul, but he wasn't alone. In every photo, he was meeting with different people, and Isla recognized some of them from the files she'd processed for Kale, rival organizations, people who'd been actively working against Kale's interests for years. He's not a hotel heir looking for consultants, Kale said, his voice deadly calm. He's a plant. Someone sent him to get close to my operation through you. Isla felt cold. That's not possible, he seemed so. Genuine, Kale's laugh was bitter. That's what makes him good at it. Isla, look at the timestamps. She did. The photos spanned weeks. Yi had been systematically meeting with Kale's enemies, building relationships, gathering information. And tonight, he'd zeroed in on the one person closest to Kale who might not be on guard. His secretary. He wasn't interested in you romantically, Kale said, showing her another photo. This one showed Yi with a woman who looked remarkably similar to Isla, same build, same complexion, both of them laughing outside a cafe. He has a type, women close to men in power. He gets close, gains trust, gathers intelligence, and then disappears before anyone realizes what happened. But I didn't tell him anything, Isla protested, her mind reeling. Not tonight, but he would have asked you out, would have been charming and perfect, and slowly, over weeks or months, would have gotten you to trust him. Maybe you would have complained about work, mentioned a deal, shared something that seemed insignificant but was actually crucial. Isla sank into one of the leather chairs, feeling sick. So when you said he was interested in me, I wasn't being jealous. Well, I was, Kale amended. But I was also right. He was a threat, Isla, just not the kind you thought. The phone crackled. Boss, there's more, Marcus said. We've been digging into his background. Ihan isn't even his real name. He's actually... The line went dead. Kale immediately tried calling back. Nothing. He tried Jin. Yuna, no one answered. That's not normal, Isla whispered. No, Kale agreed, his face grim. It's not. He moved to his laptop, fingers flying over the keys. Isla watched as he pulled up security feeds for the building, for his other properties, for the locations where his people usually were. Everything was dark. Someone had systematically cut them off from their entire network. "Kale," Isla said slowly, "what's happening?" Before he could answer, the lights in the office flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The city view that had provided ambient light was suddenly blocked as heavy security shutters slammed down over the windows with a metallic screech. They were plunged into complete darkness. Isla's breath came faster, her heart pounding. She heard Kale moving, heard a drawer opening, the distinctive sound of a gun being loaded. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice closer than she expected. His hand found hers in the darkness, warm and solid and reassuring. "Whatever happens, stay behind me." Kale's eye. The office door exploded inward with a deafening crash. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. 3 men stood in the doorway, all armed, all wearing masks. The one in front stepped forward, and even through the mask, Isla could sense the smirk in his voice. "Mr. Kang," he said pleasantly, "we've been trying to get your attention all evening. Seems you were a bit distracted." Kale shifted, positioning himself between Isla and the intruders, his own weapon raised. "Who sent you?" "You'll find out soon enough. We're just here for the girl." Everything seemed to slow down. Isla felt Kale's grip on her hand tighten painfully. "Over my dead body," he said, and there was no doubt in Isla's mind that he meant it literally. The masked man laughed. "That can be arranged, but it doesn't have to be this way. The girl comes with us peacefully, we let you and your people live. Everyone wins." "Everyone but her." "She's already involved, Mr. Kang. Has been since the moment you decided she was yours. Did you really think you could keep her in your world without consequences? You, of all people, should know better." Isla's mind was racing. She was the target. Everything tonight, the network going dark, this attack, it was all about getting to her, to use her against Kale. And suddenly, his jealousy, his possessiveness, his reluctance to cross that line between them, it all made terrible sense. "You have 3 seconds to leave," Kale said, his voice arctic. 1. The men raised their weapons. 2. "Kale, wait," Isla started. 3. What happened next was chaos. Kale fired first, taking down the man on the left. The office erupted into gunfire, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Kale shoved Isla behind his desk, using it as cover, returning fire with deadly precision. But there were more of them now, pouring through the destroyed doorway. "The panic room," Kale shouted over the noise. "Behind the bookshelf, second shelf from the top, press the spine of the blue book." "I'm not leaving you." "Isla, please." His eyes met hers for just a second, and she saw real fear there. Not for himself, for her. "Please." She ran for the bookshelf, fingers scrambling for the blue book. She found it pressed, and a section of the wall swung open, revealing a small, reinforced room. She looked back at Kale, who was reloading, blood streaming from a cut on his temple. "Go," he ordered. But as Isla moved toward the panic room, one of the masked men broke through Kale's defense. He grabbed her from behind, arm around her throat, gun pressed to her head. Everything stopped. "Drop it, Kang," the man said, "or I put a bullet in her brain right now." Kale lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes never leaving Isla's face. "Let her go. This is between you and me." "Oh, but it's not. It hasn't been for a while now. See, we've been watching you, watching the way you look at her, the way you protect her. We knew eventually you'd slip up, let your guard down. And tonight, you did." "What do you want?" Kale asked, and Isla had never heard him sound so helpless. "We want you to understand something, Mr. Kang. We want you to understand that there are consequences to caring about people in your world. That love makes you weak. That the moment you let someone in, you give your enemies exactly what they need to destroy you." The man's grip tightened on Isla's throat. She couldn't breathe, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. "Stop," Kale said, and it came out like a plea. "Please, I'll do whatever you want, just let her go." "No," the man said. "I don't think I will. See, she needs to disappear for a while, long enough for you to learn your lesson, long enough for you to understand the price of attachment." He started dragging Isla backward toward the door. She struggled, but he was too strong, the gun still pressed against her temple. Cale moved to follow, but 3 more men emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on him. "This is where we part ways, Mr. Kang," the man said. "Don't try to follow, don't try to find her. If you do, if you make any move to locate her, she dies. You have 48 hours to think about what matters more, your pride or her life. Use them wisely." "Isla," Cale shouted as they pulled her through the doorway. "Cale," she fought against her captor, desperate, terrified. "Cale, A cloth was pressed over her mouth and nose, soaked in something chemical and sickeningly sweet. The world started to blur, to fade. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Cale's face, absolutely devastated, reaching for her even as his own men held him back. And then nothing. Cale stared at the destroyed office, at the blood on the floor, some of it his. The emergency teams had arrived too late. They always did when things were truly important. Marcus stood beside him, arm in a sling from where he'd taken a bullet fighting off their own attackers at the warehouse. Yuna was on her laptop, tracking every lead, every whisper. Jin was making calls, pulling in favors from every contact they had. But Isla was gone. Cale's hand shook as he picked up her phone from where it had fallen during the struggle. The screen was cracked but still lit up with her lock screen photo. It was a picture of a sunset, taken from his office window. She used to sit and watch the sunset during long work nights, said it reminded her that even the darkest days eventually ended. "We'll find her, boss," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever it takes." 48 hours, Cale said, his voice hollow. "They gave me 48 hours to decide if I care more about my pride or her life, as if there's any question." "It's a trap," Yuna said from her position at the computer. "They want you to break, to give them something. Information, probably, or access to your network." "I don't care what they want. I want her back." "Cale," Marcus said carefully, "you told her you were dangerous. That being with you would put her at risk. This is." "Don't," Cale's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare say this proves I was right. I was right about the danger, but I was wrong about everything else. I should have told her how I felt. I should have let her make her own choice instead of making it for her. And now..." He broke off, unable to finish the sentence. Now she was gone, and it was his fault. His phone rang, unknown number. He answered immediately, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Kang," it was the voice from the office, the man who'd taken Isla. "I trust you've been thinking." "Where is she, if you've heard her?" "She's alive, for now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on you." "What do you want?" "We want access to your shipping manifests for the next 6 months. We want the names of your offshore contacts. We want your routes through Busan. And we want you to step back from the Songpa district operations." It was everything. His entire network, his contacts, his territory. They weren't just trying to hurt him. They were trying to dismantle everything he'd built. "And if I refuse?" "Then Miss Santos dies, slowly, and we make sure you watch." Cale's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "I want proof she's alive. I want to talk to her." "You're not in a position to make demands." "No proof, no deal," Cale said flatly. "You could have already killed her for all I know. I'm not giving you anything until I know she's alive." There was a pause, some muffled conversation in the background. Then a different voice came on the line. Weak, frightened, but unmistakably hers. "Cale." His heart clenched. "Isla, are you hurt?" "I'm okay, her voice broke. "I'm sorry, I should have listened to you, about the danger about." "Don't," he interrupted, his own voice rough. "Don't apologize, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." "But..." The line was suddenly muffled, as if someone had covered the phone. He heard Isla cry out, heard the sound of impact, and rage such as he'd never known flooded through him. "If you touch her again," he said, his voice deadly calm, "I will burn your entire organization to the ground and salt the earth where it stood." The first voice came back on. 48 hours, Mr. Kang. We'll be in touch with a location for the exchange. Your network for the girl. Think carefully about your choice." The line went dead. Cale stood there, still holding the phone, his whole body vibrating with impotent fury. He wanted to break something, to hurt someone, to tear the city apart until he found her. "Boss," Yuna said quietly, "I got a trace. It wasn't much, but the call bounced off a tower in Gangnam. There are maybe 20 buildings in that radius that would be suitable for holding someone." "Then we check all 20, Kale said immediately. "We have 42 hours left," Marcus added. "If we move fast, we might be able to find her before the exchange." "And if we can't?" Marcus and Yuna exchanged glances. "Then you'll have to decide what matters more," Marcus said carefully. "Your empire or—" "Her," Kale interrupted. "She matters more. She's always mattered more. The empire, the network, all of it, it's meaningless without her." It was the first time he'd admitted it out loud. The first time he'd let himself acknowledge that somewhere along the way, his brilliant, beautiful, fierce secretary had become the most important thing in his world. And now she was gone, taken because of him, because he'd been too proud, too scared, too convinced he could keep her at arm's length and still somehow keep her safe. He'd been a fool. "Then we get her back," Yuna said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Kale nodded, already moving toward the door. "Marcus, call in every favor we have. Yuna, keep tracking any communication from them. Jin, get the car ready. We're going to check every building in that radius personally." As they mobilized, as his team sprang into action, Kale allowed himself one moment of vulnerability. One moment where he pressed his hand against his chest, right over his heart, and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. "Hold on, Isla," he whispered. "Hold on, I'm coming for you." He just hoped he'd reach her in time. What will Kale choose, his empire or the woman he loves? Can he find Isla before time runs out? And what will happen when they finally confront the truth between them? Stay tuned.